Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB.
and LB. If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Health Multiverse. I am HB here with my co-host LB, and today we are talking about Prince John from Robin Hood, which is very exciting. I hadn't seen this movie in so many long years, since probably I was a child. I forgot how absolutely delightful this film is.
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. Wait, can I ask you a question though? Did you
Yeah.
also have a crush on Robin Hood, the fox,
Yeah.
growing up?
Yes. My friends, we were talking about like the trend, the hear me out trend that's happening right now, where everyone's like, hear me out, hear me out. And my friends were all like, oh, the Fox version of Robin Hood. And I was like, that's not a hear me out. Like, everyone had a crush on him. I feel like,
yeah. You don't need to
eh,
like try and convince anybody about that. I think everyone,
yeah,
whatever walk of life you come from, it's just like yeah, for sure.
for sure. Yeah, no questions asked. The Fox from Robin Hood. Yeah, 100%. No, because I was telling them about how Pongo is mine, and they were like, that's fucking weird. And I was like, okay, but if everyone can have a crush on Robin Hood, I'm
But
allowed to have had a
hear
crush.
me out. That's the whole point.
Yeah. But I think their difference is that like Pongo is actually a dog, and in Robin Hood he's like a anthropomorphic like
yeah.
human. So
I mean, I guess, but like, I don't know. I mean, like, okay, mine was Kovu, and he's a lion. He doesn't like walk upright, but he has
listen,
like
you
they have
can't help
you
who
know,
you had a
I don't
crush
know.
on when you were a child. You can't help it.
Can't help it. No.
I was willing to admit it, and then I was shamed for it. And you know what? I'm not
Well, you
here
know
for
what?
it.
This is a safe space for you to express your animated crushes, and anyone listening who's like, ew, no, then you can see yourself out. I'm just kidding. Please stay.
They've probably already stopped listening if that was the case.
They're like,
So if you're
I'm
still here,
outside.
thank you.
We're sticking around. This episode is going to be great. HB and I don't even know what headspace we're in right now. We're both very tired. We're both,
Yeah.
life is just lifing. But on a really exciting note, as of recording this podcast, we're just a few days out from HB's birthday. So happy belated birthday to HB, everyone. Woo, woo, woo.
Thank you, and happy almost birthday to you, because our birthdays are exactly a week apart for anyone who does not know.
That, it's so fun. It's so cute. It's very exciting.
It is.
It's
Very
like it was
exciting.
always
Little
meant to
Libras.
be.
So thank you. Yeah, we're recording this a few days after my birthday and a few days before LB's. So happy birthday to both of us. And I'm glad we're talking about this movie around our birthdays. Not that it has anything to do with that, but it's fun.
It's a fun movie. So I guess for anyone who doesn't remember or hasn't ever seen it or hasn't seen it in a while, this movie came out in 1973, which in my brain is like only 30 years ago, but it's actually like 50. And I hate that so much. I kind of had an existential crisis when I saw your note. And so I had to Google it because I was like, no, there's no way it was only 1973. And then I got checked real hard. Anyway, so this movie is like the animal kingdom's retelling of the story of the legendary Robin Hood, who is known for quote unquote stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. And so we follow Robin Hood with his best friend, best mate, Little John. Robin Hood is, as we've mentioned, a very handsome fox. And Little John, his friend, is a very lovable bear who shares a slight resemblance to Baloo from Jungle Book, which we're talking about Shere Khan this season, right?
We are. And also, speaking of that note that you just said, I think when we were talking about the Wish episode and all of the Easter eggs, I think that she calls one of the bears, Little John, and we were like, who is that? It's this Little John.
Oh, not to
Do
be
you remember
confused
that?
with. No, I don't remember that
Yeah.
at all. That I don't remember that movie. I've deleted it. I've deleted the files from my brain. Sorry.
No, I just remember kind of being like in my head being like, I know there's a bear named Little John. I just can't place what movie he's in. It is this one. It is Robin Hood. So if you listened to our
Yes.
Wish episode and were screaming at us like, it's Robin Hood, guys.
We got
We get
there.
it now.
We got there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It only took us a few movies and a couple weeks, but that's okay. And as much as we would love to gush and talk about Robin Hood, the main focus of our episode today is Prince John, the main antagonist of this movie. And Little John. Prince John is introduced to us as King Richard's younger brother, who I'm just going to read the note that you made, HB. Thank you. So Prince John, his greedy and treacherous brother, usurped the crown. So Robin Hood is on a mission, on a quest to, I don't know, advocate, I guess, for King Richard, because Prince John has been stealing from the poor by overtaxing, being really greedy, pretty much leaving his subjects in ruin to as like a show of power, I guess.
Yeah. Power, power, power.
Money. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Prince John's little minion is actually his two. So he has Hiss, who is a snake. Their animation and design very closely resembles Shere Khan and whatever the snake's name is, Koa. And then there's also the sheriff of Nottingham, who is also under the guise of stealing for Prince John, is like taking poor people's money and stealing money out of the poor box and coming on collections day and yeah, he's just a bad dude. He's a bad dude.
Yeah. Jailing the people who don't pay their taxes. Now, I am just going to be flat out honest. I had no idea what was going on in this movie when I watched it as a kid.
No, the themes are so mature. Like it's visually stunning. The animation is so beautiful. I made a note that I missed this animation, and I know it was like a lot of work because it was mainly like one or two people animating this and doing it scene by scene, frame by frame, but it is just so beautiful and I miss it. I love how much technology has progressed. I love some of the 3D kind of, styles that we have. I don't love a lot of the CGI in the quote unquote live action movies, but I miss this. Bring it back.
Yeah.
Bring it
I
back.
was thinking that too, like the scene where Maid Marian and Robin Hood are walking in the woods at night and the little fireflies are going across. And then also when they show the animals crying, the way that they animated like having tears in their eyes, like before the teardrop falls. I just thought it was so cool. And then I was thinking, I was like, man, you don't get this anymore. You just don't get it anymore. And it reminded me of how I may have said this on the podcast before, but the kids I babysit refused to watch many things. But one of the big things that they have never seen because it looks old, quote unquote, because of the way it's animated, is The Land Before Time. And I haven't seen The Land Before Time in a while, so I don't know if it's as beautifully animated as this. I think it is, but it just like broke my heart to think that because they're so used to the type of animation that we have now, they look at something like this and they don't want to watch it because it quote unquote looks old. And I'm like, but it's still beautiful for like what it is.
It's still so beautiful. I like to say, and I like to think that we as millennials were born in a very sweet spot. And I know that our generation is just like clouded by nostalgia for sure. But I'd like to think that we were born in a period where we got kind of the best of both worlds in a lot of ways and also in not a lot of great ways. But but as far as animation goes, like we had these 2D drawings that was like I don't know, like in our formative years in the 90s and early 2000s. And then we got to see the beginnings of these 3D styles, with Pixar and Toy Story and then DreamWorks and blah, 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 blah. And so I think it helped us develop like a really nice appreciation for both of these so that when we see something that's 2D animated from, even if it's way before our time, we're not turned off immediately from it,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I watched this as a kid. The plot completely over my head. Had a lot of fun watching it. And at the very beginning, this made me laugh because there's like a whole bunch that you have to read, and I was looking at it like I don't think I could read the last time I watched this movie. So I had no idea what was going on. But the whistling that the rooster who's like narrating the story,
Yeah.
that gave
Ooh-la-la-la-lay.
me like yeah, it just like gave me a visceral like I just had like a visceral reaction to it of like transport back to being child
Young
watching this. Yeah, young watching
baby.
this movie.
Yeah. Obviously, neither HB and I were born in 1973, but definitely one that I watched. Definitely one we had on VHS. The rooster in Robin Hood is named Alan Adale, and he's kind of the narrator of this movie. And he, from the get go, tells us that like this is how it quote unquote really happened. And so it just reminded me of like a stage play where you have different animals playing different parts and the relations don't exactly make sense, but it's a space, and this is what I love about theater. It's a space where anyone can be anything and play anyone. And I think that's really beautiful. And I love how this captured it, especially since I just saw Wicked recently. Very, very exciting. And that's something I've just always loved about the stage is I don't know, like a role isn't specific to one kind of person. Like you can have multiples. Like there are so many Elphabas. There have been so many Galindas, and they all have their different takes. Anyway, we're not here to talk about theater as much as I would love to. This movie has not been in my rotation very much, and I feel like for kind of the same reasons that the themes and I guess I don't know if there's like an actual message of the movie, but as far as like stealing from the rich and giving back to the poor and the morals around that and the ethics and the ambiguity of it all and the nuance was just lost on me as a child, but it is beautiful and watching it again just
It's
made me really happy.
yeah, it's also so fun. Like
It is.
watching Maid Marian meet the kids and play pretend with them, like
Oh, yeah.
so sweet and fun. And yeah, it's a very fun, sweet movie. What I think is interesting about Disney is that I feel like they do tend to give this message, like it gives Aladdin, like in Aladdin, where he's like, is it stealing if you can't afford to pay for it, right? Like, is it okay to imprison someone because they are just trying to eat? And I'm just like reflecting on how it seems like the messaging of Disney was so different than it is now, if that makes sense. Or like, I'm not really sure because Disney at the time of these movies, and by these movies I mean like obviously Robin Hood and then into Aladdin, was not the kind of like monopoly that it is now on like
Mm-hmm.
entertainment and the industry. And so it just makes me curious of like, Disney almost is like a political entity at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that like these are some of the movies that have come from such a giant political entity that kind of does take a lot of people's money.
No,
Like
for sure. Yeah, I get that.
it's just like a little ironic to me. Yeah, that it's like I'm watching this movie on Disney Plus that I pay way too much for per month and just thinking about like how much are the animators making who worked on this movie? Like it's just too much reflection goes into it when I start really sitting and thinking about it. And then when you also sit and think about it as an adult, I mean like this movie, watching it as an adult is really like again, and I know it's like a tale, not to quote Beauty and the Beast, but like a tale as old as time is like paying taxes, the rich keep getting richer, the poor keep getting poorer.
Yeah,
But that hasn't changed at
it
all.
really hasn't. I know. I know. I know.
And that makes
It's
me sad.
it makes me yeah, I get a little existential about it, and I
Yeah.
will try to keep it kind of light in this episode. But that is like it's funny that we both had that thought because I was watching it and I was like, I wonder how they would go about this today. Like how would they tell the
Yeah.
story today? Because I was also thinking, have we gotten a retelling of Robin Hood in recent years.
Right. It's like define recent.
Yeah,
Shrek was probably the
that's the one that came to
most
my
recent.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, like, Robin Hood's not even really featured in Shrek. He just exists inside of the world.
yeah. He's like in the
So,
universe. Yeah, I don't know. While we're on this subject too, I just want to like disclaim that while these characters are loosely based on historical figures, we're here to talk about the portrayal of them in this movie, not the historical people, like actual Prince
yeah.
John and King Richard and the history of England, because that is way above my head. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
anything about that.
No, this is not a history lesson. We're literally just talking about a Disney movie.
The only thing I will say is that if you're curious, because I was, if Robin Hood was a real person, technically no, he was a legend, but apparently over the course of 100 or some odd years, there have been multiple stories about someone named Robin Hood. So the idea or the theory is that multiple outlaws and vigilantes, or whatever you want to call them, anti-heroes if you will, had adopted the name Robin Hood with kind of the
Well,
same goal or mission in mind, as far as like stealing from the rich and giving to the poor.
yeah, there's like an investment app called Robinhood, kind of based on that. It's like
I hate
for,
that.
well, no, don't hate it. No, it's for people so that it's to make investing accessible to people who don't understand
Oh,
investing.
see, I made a judgment too quickly.
You
That was
sure
me.
did.
That was
I
my
was
bad.
like,
Well,
that's why, yeah.
I thought it was like one of those things like Tesla, where they're using the name of someone who actually was trying to do good to better the wealthy. And when I hear
Well,
investment, I think finance bros, and I'm like, ew. Sorry if any
I
finance
mean,
bros are listening.
I have never personally used Robinhood, but I know people who do. And according to my limited knowledge of it, it's commission free and it helps you understand investing without really like it makes it a little more accessible to the average person.
Mm.
So that's like someone who has sort of commissioned the name Robinhood. But I don't take my word for it. I know nothing actually about it, but that is my knowledge of it. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting how both Robin Hood and Prince John have these two allies, friends, whatever you want to call them, who kind of act as like, I don't want to say moral compass, but when Robin Hood is like, let's steal from royalty, Little John is like, hang on, wait, I don't think, isn't there a rule against this? Like, isn't this like our line? And I think even his says something to, I having such a hard time with this? Says something to
Well,
Prince
because
John, Little John and Prince John. Yeah, I'm like,
yeah, it's very rare that two characters in the same film have the same name, and this is probably why. I
like
kind of like it.
they couldn't have given them two different names. Why does Little John have to be Little John if they're based on like not real people? I mean, Prince John is. So Little John could have had a different name. And every time I say Little John, I think of Little John. Yeah. Anyway, okay, hang on. I got to get back on track here. Maybe it's not so much him being a moral compass, but he's definitely in Prince John's ear, and he's more so of a hype man and being like, yes, you're always right, you're perfect, you have such good ideas, just feeding into this really toxic, greedy, controlling, insecure
Mm.
person. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And like his is an interesting character if we look at him as
Yeah.
like an ally, because Prince John quite literally treats him horribly, like beats him,
Yeah. Yeah.
ties him in knots because he's a little snake. It's and yet for the most part, Hiss is incredibly loyal to him.
Yeah. Prince John
And
is always like, Hiss, where are you? You're never here when I need you. And he's like,
right
stuck.
here.
Yeah, he's like he's always been right there, always at his right hand, and then he gets like trapped in an ale barrel or
So
is
funny.
doing something, and of course it's like those kinds of people who are like, you're never there for me when I need you, but they don't take into account all the times that person has been there for them. It's very frustrating, actually.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Prince John like the thing I forgot about him as soon as I saw it on screen, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is everything about this character, is the way that every time he says mommy, or like every time his
Oh,
mom
yeah.
comes up or he starts feeling very insecure about something, he puts his thumb in his mouth and like holds his ear. And I was like, wow, if we're talking about mommy issues,
Mm-hmm.
they're very kind of blatantly here in the like mother did always like Richard best. Then he's like, mommy. I was like, wow, they're really just making him like a triggered little baby right now.
And he is a baby. Like the only way that he has any what he thinks is power is by how much gold he has, how many things that he has, and making sure that everyone else has less than him in some kind of way. Probably perpetuating this cycle of his elder brother Richard getting all of the attention and him not having anything. So for him to feel better about himself, he plays out the same kind of narrative with his subjects, who are not really his subjects because he's the prince, not the king. And he's trying to gain, I don't even know if he's like trying to gain loyalty or what is he trying to gain? Just power?
His
Greed? Money? Just
yeah.
money? Yeah.
Well, it's greed until Robin Hood starts robbing him of that. And
Mm.
then his motivation becomes to get rid of Robin Hood. But it's not very, his motivation has no legs, if that makes sense. Like he doesn't have very much,
Well, and this
there's
is
not much
why
behind it.
he wasn't a good ruler and why he didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of support. And the only way he could get support was by paying people to like him and to be on his side.
Yeah.
So, you know, that
Yeah. As we were watching it through the lens of this, I was like, okay, so he wants money, he wants power, he wants to kill Robin Hood, but like, why?
yeah. I thought it was interesting too, the scene where Robin Hood is stealing all of Prince John's money that he sleeps with in the same room. There's a sack of gold under Prince John's pillow, and this is at the end after he's cleared out the entire room, but he wants that one, and he risks a lot to get that one bag. And I had this thought of like, oh, that's really interesting that like we're kind of seeing Robin Hood's greed come out here.
Mm,
And I thought
that
I
is
had this
interesting.
thought that like maybe they're two sides of the same coin as far as greed goes, but one is using it in a very evil, oppressive, manipulative, controlling kind of way, and then Robin Hood is using it, I guess, better because he's giving it back to the people, but he is also greedy. And I wonder if because he has the support of the people and he is well liked, it doesn't turn him into the villain, you know?
Yeah, although I wonder if that is necessarily greed or if it's something else. I don't know really what it would be because I feel like greed is for your own gain, but it doesn't
Mm,
feel like Robin
he's like
Hood
more
uses.
altruistic.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying is like why did he have to get the last two bags of gold? Like
Mm-hmm.
why couldn't he just leave Prince John with cuddling his bag of gold and the one under his pillow, right? Because I had that thought as well. I was like, why are you doing this? But I don't necessarily know if greed is the right word for him wanting it.
Yeah, he's not doing it because he's greedy in the same sense that Prince John is, but that moment felt greedy, if that makes sense.
No, I
Um,
get what you're saying. I just think it's like not quite the right word.
I know, and I can't think of another word for it, but
Yeah.
anyway, you get what I'm saying. Hopefully, the
Mhm.
people listening get what I'm saying. But because I thought that was interesting too, how they're stealing from the rich and Little John. And I'm curious who they were stealing from originally before they started stealing from Prince John, because that's when Little John is like, oh wait, no, there's a rule against this.
Yeah, probably just other wealthy people, which maybe are like other royal. I don't really know because they only show the
Yeah.
certain people in the town. So,
Yeah. 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 But because of this, Robin Hood is classified as a classical literary antihero because he's stealing, which is bad, to give to the poor, which is good. And then that also, I think that's why I got on that train of thought, is because I had this thought of how people will justify doing bad things for the greater good. But in Robin Hood's case, like, it's actually good that, you know, he's giving the money back to the people who actually need it. But then there are other groups of people, usually already in a position of power, who will claim to do bad things for the greater good. So as far as Prince John's background, we talked a little bit about his motivation, but his background is that he feels very inferior to his brother. And then I had this thought too of, like, he's the baby. I mean, he acts like a baby, but he is, you know, the youngest child. And in our culture today, it feels like the youngest usually get a lot more coddling, a lot more passes. They're treated very differently than the eldest. But I guess in this setting, in these times, especially with royalty, the firstborn is given a little bit more attention because they're the ones who are going to rule next, you know, and then the ones born after them are just kind of like insurance in case the firstborn dies or something, so that they can carry on the lineage. I'm thinking of like Scar and Mufasa, although in our Scar episode we learned that, was Scar the firstborn? Scar was the firstborn, right?
I don't remember.
But now, apparently, in the Mufasa movie that's coming out later this year, Mufasa was adopted, and Scar was the one born to their parents. They find Mufasa, adopt him, and then whatever things
Really?
happen, and then Mufasa becomes king. Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I am shocked by that.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of The Prince of Egypt, that adaptation of the Moses story, how the Pharaoh, you know, Moses is found in a basket in the river. Have you seen Prince of Egypt? Girl, you want to talk about beautiful animation? Prince of Egypt is so fucking good. Like, get rid of all of the biblical themes around it. It's such a good movie. It's like dream. I love DreamWorks movies. I know we've been talking a lot about Disney, but like, I love DreamWorks, and I think this is one of their best movies of all time.
To get back to what you were saying before, Scar is not the first in line to the throne.
Oh, okay.
It was Mufasa. It's just that Scar would be next in line until Mufasa has a son.
Right.
Which
right,
is
right,
why.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think as Courtney said in our episode, I think there are different canon stories as to how Scar became Scar, right? So like, there are versions of it where Scar is the one who's adopted. There are versions of it where there's different versions of it.
Okay. I see. That makes sense. So, like you pointed out, there was obviously something going on with their mother in particular that makes Prince John very baby-like, baby-ish, infantile in a way, from the sucking of thumbs to crying over his mommy, blah, 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 blah. What personality traits would you give Prince John?
All of the negative ones.
Fair. Yeah. I like that.
No,
answer.
he's just like, he's I mean, a lot of what we've been saying about a lot of the villains that we've talked about this season, I feel like it's much of the same, like a very a disregard for others and their feelings, high sense of like, they view themselves as higher, but not necessarily because they actually think they're better, because it's more of like an inferiority sort of complex thing.
Totally. Very insecure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about childhood and trauma.
Oh, I do want to say what you said a little bit ago about sibling dynamics. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was the golden child of my family. Like, Hallie,
okay.
when we look at our childhood and make joke about it, like, it's clear that I was my mom's favorite. But Hallie was my dad's favorite. So we each had someone, you know?
I think we've talked about this in a different episode. Yeah. How each parent kind of had their own favorite. So I guess it was like kind of balanced in that kind of way. But
Well, yeah, but it just made me like what you were saying about like the youngest sibling sort of getting a lot of coddling and everything
mm,
like that. Like I think that in some family dynamics there is someone, and I don't think it's always the same who it is, but there
yeah.
is someone in the family who is like the golden child who can do no wrong, who can whatever whatever. And I will admit that that was me when I was growing up. Like I have nothing against admitting that and knowing that about myself and realizing that was
Step.
me.
We talked a little bit about relationships as far as like their relationships with other characters, heroes, allies, or minions. Like you mentioned, Prince John is very abusive to Hiss, and Hiss puts up with it. Why? I don't know. He doesn't treat the Sheriff of Nottingham poorly, probably because he can't do anything. Like he can't physically hurt the sheriff because he's much larger. He doesn't even try to like talk down to him in any kind of way. I think he's kind of threatened by him. So he'd rather have him on
Yeah.
his good side, you know? And obviously he's being
There's only
paid.
one time, there's one time where he hears them singing the song about him and he throws like a pot of something at their heads. But I think it's like at both of them, not just at
Yeah.
the sheriff.
Yeah.
But you're right. The sheriff is a lot more intimidating than a tiny little snake. You know, we've got a
Yes.
giant wolf here. Side note, tangentially related. I do think that it is funny and interesting that the sheriff, he's not necessarily portrayed as stupid, but definitely like the bad guy. Prince John is kind of portrayed as stupid, like an idiot,
Mm.
but he's also not necessarily as dumb as he looks because, you know, in that first scene where Robin Hood and Little John steal from him, Hiss is the one who's like, "You are being robbed right now, you idiot." Like
Yeah.
trying to tell
Yeah.
him over and over
Yeah.
again. But then there's the scene that's basically the archery contest that Prince John sets as a trap to catch Robin Hood. And he catches on that Robin Hood is the stork or whatever he's
Mm.
dressed up as in costume. And he catches on pretty quickly, I would say. So it's like he's not as dumb, I guess, as he seems, question mark. But on theme and kind of going back to what I was talking about before, I think it's interesting that it's like political figure and police officer are villain in movie, and a religious figure and more like the community are seen as the positive. And I will say that I think in the last several, however many years, religion has kind of taken a big, how do I say this? I think that when you view religion as a form of community, it has really positive impacts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what this movie does really well, is it shows religion as a form of community and not as like a, this is our practice that we are worshiping someone,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I would go so far as to say it's more about faith bringing people together, whereas the place that we're coming from is like organized religion has done a lot of harm to people.
Yeah.
So it's not even so much the religion itself, but just the collective faith that people have in whatever. And in this case, it's Robin Hood. Not that they view him as a god or anything, but yeah.
But yeah, I just think it's really kind of beautiful that Friar Tuck is the, you know, they call him like the do-gooder or the good something of
Mm-hmm.
the of of Sherwood Forest. And it's been a while since I've like watched something with a religious figure as like a good person and like agreed with it, if that makes sense, you know?
Fair. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how can you not
And
love him? He's like,
well, yeah,
he's just trying his best. He's just trying his best. And he keeps getting
but that's,
thwarted by the sheriff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just making an observation about how I agree with a lot of the messaging of this movie. And I think that it's interesting where we are politically now today. And I know you said you're going to keep this episode light, but I'm not gonna like use names or say whatever, but it's like it just is interesting that like political figures and the police are being seen as villains in this movie, and community and faith and, you know, bringing like people coming together for, you know, the sake of the people is what is being seen as good and heroes. And I just think it's another example of like, you know, people being fans of something or enjoying something and then not quite grasping the actual message that it's sending. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, we
Maybe.
didn't get these messages as children, so, you know.
No, of course. Yeah. No, yeah.
Coping mechanisms. One of the questions that we explore with our villains is what unhealthy coping mechanisms do they use to deal with their emotions? I don't necessarily know if like him sucking his thumb and crying for mommy is like unhealthy. It's not great, but I thought it was interesting how Hiss starts to hypnotize him, and he's like, I think hypnosis
Yeah.
would be really good for you. And it made me think about like I know some hypnotherapists. I know people who have trained in hypnotherapy, and I myself have taken sessions from these people and I have found great results. And so I thought it was really funny that I don't know, because this movie is quote unquote so old, what modern day hypnotherapist might view that, because it's kind of portrayed in like a negative light. And also this idea that like, you know, hypnosis is like looking at a clock and like, I don't know, you're gonna bark like a
Mm.
dog and blah 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 blah. But I do know that there are some people who have used hypnotherapy to like break certain habits. Like people have used it to quit smoking, quit gambling. So there are definitely some proven effects, whether it's like specifically because of hypnosis or not. But I thought that was kind of interesting. One of the coping mechanisms
Yeah.
that came to mind was how Hiss recommends, like, oh, do you want to count your money again? So I would say
Yeah.
him sitting in his room and counting all of his money is definitely an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's also times where he's just randomly holding a mirror to his face. Did you notice that?
Oh, I did not notice that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think maybe I was just looking at it like, oh, he reminds me of King Magnifico a little bit. Not that
Oh,
King
for sure.
Magnifico, you know, wanted a bunch of money, but he wanted power, question mark.
He wanted love and admiration, and he
And
wanted to be liked
control.
by people. Yeah, he wanted to
Yeah.
control. So I think there's a lot of similarities there, going about
Yeah.
getting love and control in all of the wrong ways.
Yeah, but it was just like he would just randomly be like holding a mirror to his face while he was talking to his, and I was like, why? Why are you holding a mirror right now? Like it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Were there any moments that showed vulnerability or a desire for connection?
I think when he reverts to infantile self, I think that is a form of vulnerability. Like you said, it's a coping mechanism. So sometimes when we like turn to those coping mechanisms, it's not it's a vulnerable version of ourselves that we are becoming.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like actually opening himself up to anything, no. I don't think so.
No. Yeah. No, I don't think so either.
I saw no vulnerability from this lion.
No, otherwise he's very well guarded as far as like his emotions go. And even when Hiss is trying to break him out of his kind of anger, he's still very quiet, unresponsive.
Yeah.
I'm
And he's
trying to.
very physically violent, as we've brought up before a couple of
Oh
times.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's unhealthy for sure. Do you see, so at the end of the movie, this is one of the few villains that we've talked about where they don't die in the end. He just gets King Richard comes back, sends him to jail. They're at the what is it called? The Royal Rock Pile. It's what the little sign says, and it's Prince John, Hiss, and the Sheriff of Nottingham, like just breaking rocks. And I guess Hiss keeps like dropping the rocks on his feet. Anyway, what do you think he would need to have done for redemption or change?
Honestly, I have no idea. I know we're not quite there at ranking yet, but like I'm just very much like he feels like such an I'm so indifferent to him as a villain, if that makes sense.
Oh, for
You know what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, sure, he's evil, And it is really shitty to put poor people in jail. Like
Yeah.
that's like a really bad thing to do.
Well, he was
But
ready
I
to hang
also,
Friar Tuck. Like,
yeah, in terms of like where we are in reality right now, it's like I don't know what would need. Like I just wish he didn't exist. That's basically how I feel. So it's like in some ways I would rank him like really low on the villain list because I'm like, what did he do? But at the same time, I'm like, he did a lot. It just feels like he wasn't good at it. Does that make any sense at
well,
all?
I no, I hear what you're saying. I think it's one of those things where it's not as outright as like he didn't commit mass murder. He didn't commit
Hmm.
genocide. He didn't actively go out of his way to kill somebody like Isma tries to.
Hmm.
To me, it's like many corporations in today's society, like you're talking about, where it's very invisible. It's not very obvious in the ways that he is. I mean, it's obvious because they're shining a big spotlight on it for the plot of the movie. But like, if we were to take a step back and look and view it from like our own lives and our own perspective and our own world, it's not very obvious,
Hmm.
as far
Yeah.
as like you said, how the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep staying poor. So that's bad. But I agree with you that
Yeah.
he's not as evil as maybe trying to kill a bunch of puppies or anything like that. So he is also kind of lower on my, and he also doesn't succeed. Like his whole motivation too is he's on a mission to usurp his brother, who is currently the king of England, off on a crusade, blah 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 blah, who is viewed and loved by his people, but he wants that, and he thinks his way of doing that is by starting with Nottingham, taking over this one area, and his power will kind of spread, is what I'm understanding his motivation to be. And he doesn't succeed, and he doesn't do a good job because he is like very much not loved and he's hated. And the only reason why he has this power is because he has kind of weaseled his way into this position, not because
Yeah.
he is actually cunning or smart or I don't know, because I
Manipulative.
really like
Yeah.
manipulative. Yeah. And because I watch a lot of Game of Thrones, how some people will like weave these webs to get what they want. He was just like already in this position and took advantage of it, and it was
Yeah.
really easy for him to do. So I get what you mean as far as like he's not that bad, but he's still bad. I mean, that's why we're talking
Yeah.
about him in this season, is like he's still a villain. Like he does some really not
Yeah.
good things. I think for
Yeah.
me, as far as like redemption or change, it would definitely be giving the money back, pulling back on the
Mm.
overtaxation, um, arresting children, first of all,
The
um,
baby
the
bunnies.
baby bunny and Toby, poor Toby. Yeah, I guess that, and trying to not take the crown. Just know your place. You're prince. You're probably not going to sit on the throne.
Know
Accept
your
it.
place.
Know your place. That would be my. It's the only way he could change for me, is if he's like, you know what? Yeah, actually, you're right. I'm a bad guy. I've done some bad things, and I'm not going to do it again. And I'm changed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good answer.
And now I have some like more fun questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm
And
ready.
okay, actually, this is not so fun question. I have another question for you.
Mhm.
I got to see your notes as I was doing my own watch of this movie, and I noticed what you said about fat shaming Little John, about how like the sheriff and his minions couldn't even lift him up. And I don't know why I had this thought, but like I kind of paused the movie, and I want to ask this from a place of genuine curiosity. And I recognize that it might come off as insensitive because I do not identify as fat, nor do I live in a larger body. So I just want to make it very clear that I'm asking this friend to friend, very genuine. When does joking turn into shaming, as far as like fat shaming goes? And I know that like a good rule of thumb is to just like don't make jokes about people's bodies, but the way that I understood it before I saw your note was that like it was just a friend poking fun at a friend. It was just like a little jest, like, hey, you're a big guy, they couldn't lift you up if they wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. And I think that for every person, it's different. And I think it depends on how what your relationship is with the person
Mm-hmm.
and how
Mm-hmm.
triggering something might be for you. Anytime anyone comments about my body, I'm not okay with it. If any of my friends talk about that if any of my friends said something like that to me, I would be upset by it. And I think that none of my friends would.
Well, you've made it very clear that it is a trigger for you, an insecurity or like a boundary anyway. Like, hey,
Yeah.
comments, whether positive or negative, about my body are off limits, and you've made that very clear. So that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that there are some relationships and some friendships where if that was said to someone, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I do think that it is a lot more common among amongst and between thinner people to have those kinds of conversations with each other because you've never actually had that lived experience. So, like a lot of thin people say, I feel fat. Well, fat is not a feeling, but you use it as an excuse for saying something else negative about yourself rather than what you're actually feeling. So it's like, oh, I feel bloated today. Oh, I feel ugly today. Oh, I feel XYZ today. But you use the word fat because, that's just what comes to your mind. But fat is not a feeling. But a lot of people in larger bodies, we just exist in our larger bodies. So we don't get an opportunity to feel fat. We just are,
Okay.
And so I think that's a similar thing here where I think and I'm not the end all be all speaking for all people in larger bodies. This is just like my general
Right.
kind of observation is that I think it's safer for people in thinner bodies to joke like this with each other because it's not their actual lived experience.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Just because there was someone in the group who was joking about their weight, like they are fat, and they made a joke about how they and their partner get mistaken as siblings because they look very similar, and then they like made a self-deprecating joke about like, yeah, and we're also fat, and I
Well, I
saw that
think
comment.
that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's different too. I think that is twofold. I don't know this person, but I think that's
Yeah.
twofold. I think that's like we're taught when we live in larger bodies to be self-deprecating because having a sense of humor makes you more jolly and
More.
desirable to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also could be a sort of reclaiming of it. Like, yeah, I am fat, whatever. I have a lot of notes about Lady Cluck sort of reclaiming the word fat. Like,
So actually I watched this with a friend and we were kind of texting about it as we were watching. They gave a chicken cleavage. Like what?
I I think it's hilarious.
I
But
love
I
it.
mean, like, if you're gonna give any, yeah, she's got the fluff. But when when everyone's being chased, I think it's Prince John who says, "Seize the fat one," and
Oh, I didn't catch that.
he fat shames so much, or he just like refers to the larger bodied characters as fat all the time.
Uh-huh.
So he goes, "Seize the fat one," and she just like plows through all the guards like a linebacker and is just like throwing them. And to me, that is reclaiming the word fat. The way she was just
Uh-huh.
like, I'm gonna plow through you. And like, I was like, look at her go. You get it, Lady Cluck. She is the absolute plus size baddie queen representation that I am so happy exists. Like, I think it's cool that there's a lot of like, there are a lot of larger bodied characters in this movie. And like, yes, they do kind of get, I guess fat shamed is not the correct term, but their bodies are joked about, which to me feels like fat shaming when a body is joked about. And I do think that perhaps when that is not your lived experience, it is funnier to you because you've been taught that it's okay to make jokes like that. You've not necessarily ever really been on the other end of it, you know?
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah.
But again,
Thank you.
I'm not the end all be all. Like,
Totally.
that's just kind of my
No, and
perspective on it, I would
that's
say.
why I'm asking you now on our podcast and not just throwing it out on
Because
Reddit or X or
I'm
whatever.
the little boy, the 2-year-old boy who I babysit for, he has 2 older brothers who I'm very rarely ever with because I'm with the 2-year-old during the day while the older brothers are at school. And his older brothers are like 10 and 8 or something like that. They're a lot older than him. But his oldest brother, who is like probably around 10 years old, consistently calls him fatso and chub a lot. And like they're all very like what I guess could be endearing terms, but it really bothers me to hear him call his brother those things. And I'm like, I know he's only a baby and I know that he doesn't quite understand the words that you're using, but to me, it's not okay.
Well, if you're
And
doing it to your brother, you might be doing it out in the regular world because it's been normalized to make these kinds of jokes. And I can
mhm.
see how that might be problematic.
Yeah, and I just kind of I've kind of told him. I was like, "Yes, your baby 2-year-old brother is like a chunky monkey." And I think like we can call him chunky monkey. I think that's really cute, but like when you start calling him like fatso whatever, like when you I don't know, it just like there's I don't really know. It's like there's a line sort of to me and I don't know what it is, but there's a line between like endearing nickname and like actually being mean.
No, I hear it too, because like fatso gets thrown around in a very negative, harmful way. Chunky
Right.
monkeys, I mean, it's cute.
It
I don't know.
rhymes.
It rhymes. It's cute. There are a lot of babies that come into my work and I'm like, oh, chunky monkey, but I'm not like,
Yeah,
hey, look at you, fatso. Like, it's different. It's
exactly.
different. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just think, yeah, I think it's like a tonal thing. I think it's like and I see what you're saying about how the
And
way
I
that
think the
Robin
history of it too, how it's been used before, and
Mhm.
whether or not you're using it in an endearing way, it can still, I mean, there are a lot of words in today's society that came from negative roots. And whether we're trying to continue using them as like a way to neutralize the previously harmful effects, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And like I said, I think there are a lot of people who live in larger bodies who identify as fat and are okay identifying as fat. And there are people in larger bodies who are not comfortable with it. And it's not a rule of thumb as to like,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
just a tricky
No,
line to
like
toe.
like
I
you said at the
appreciate you
beginning,
asking.
it just depends. It depends on your relationship, it depends on the person. I think asking, and just like checking in with someone before, I mean, like I said, I think a good rule of thumb is to not comment on anyone's body
Yeah.
at all.
I I have like a pretty good example of like I have a friend who has a particular disability and does not identify as disabled, but it is technically a disability. And when I didn't know her as well as I do now, but thought I knew her well enough to make a joke about her
Mm.
disability,
Hmm.
she let me know that it was not okay. I was
Hmm.
like, "Oh, yeah, I actually," and now I'm cringing at the fact that I said that joke, But it was
Yeah.
like at the time I thought it was okay because I thought we were close enough and I thought it was a funny joke. Her response made it very clear that it wasn't, and I've never joked about her disability again, even though we're a lot closer now?
Yeah. It's one of those like when you know better, do better kind of things. Yeah. Thank you for, I just put you on the spot with that one. So I appreciate your very honest and vulnerable answer. So I appreciate that. And now I promise I'm moving into the funner questions, which are, what's your favorite Robin Hood adaptation or retelling?
That's a good I mean, I can't even really think of that many. Let's see, we've got him and Shrek.
Men in
We've got
Tights.
this Robin Hood Men in Tights. Well, that one's really good.
That
That one's
one's
really
so
fun. I
good.
haven't seen that one since I was in college. That I
Oh
would like to
man,
revisit.
we watched it for a
Wait,
movie night and it was so funny. It's so,
is
I
Heath
mean, it's
Ledger in
like,
is that with
no,
Heath
it's the guy who plays Wesley in Princess Bride, and I'm blanking on his name too.
Okay. Oh yes, 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 yes. What am I thinking of that Heath Ledger is in? Heath Ledger, Robin Hood? Question mark. Oh, A Knight's Tale. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
Oh yes, I forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. It's That's not quite Robin Hood though, right? That's just no,
No,
no, no, no.
I think
Okay,
I just like when I googled Heath Ledger Robin Hood just to get there and A Knight's Tale popped up.
gotcha. Yeah. Oh,
um,
there was the Robin Hood with Russell Crowe. That one's like really gritty and dark because that's all Russell Crowe ever does.
I don't remember any of those, to be
Oh, actually,
honest.
wait, there's a lot. So
Okay.
there was a Robin Hood that came out in 2018. There's one with Kevin Costner. There's The Adventures of Robin Hood from 1938. There's another Disney Robin Hood. It's called The Story of Robin Hood. Ivanhoe, which is a book, a play that features Robin Hood. I don't know the extent of all of that. Robin and Marian from 1976. Rogues of Sherwood Forest, Prince of Thieves. Yeah, oh my gosh, there's a lot. But I specifically asked that question as far as like this, Robin Hood Men in Tights, and Shrek.
Yeah, those are the only three that like count in my brain, I guess.
Same. Yeah.
It's been
If
a
you
long time since I've seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, though.
There are a couple things that are quite problematic with it, I will be honest, having seen it within the last couple of years, but it's still funny.
But also, like, even when in this movie, the 1973 Disney version, when he's the first time that they said he steals from the rich and gives to the poor, I immediately started singing the Shrek song, steal from the rich and give to the needy. Like, but I'm not greedy. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's just like in my head
of
now
course.
as a song.
That's such an iconic scene. It's yeah, it's
Yeah.
so funny.
What about you?
Oh man. It's definitely tied between this and Men in Tights. Like they serve different, they fill different needs for me. They fill different voids, if you will. This one is just like very wholesome and cute, and it feels like getting wrapped in a really warm blanket on a cold day with like a cup of chicken noodle soup and ginger ale. And then Men in
Mhm.
Tights is just like silly, goofy, kind of inappropriate fun times with your best friends, you know?
Yeah.
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 And then my last question that I had for you was, what are your thoughts on love being kind of a focal point of the plot?
How did I know you were gonna ask me this? Oh, that's so funny. I don't I don't know why, but I love them together. I
They're so
love
cute.
Robin Hood and Maid Marian, yes, though, but I think one of the reasons why is that they have a history and they've sort
Mm,
of been separated
hmm.
and they both have been thinking about each other and have loved each other and then they just like come together. And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily like a main, like I guess it is part of why Robin Hood comes to the archery tournament and why, some things move forward. But I do feel like Robin Hood's motivations for helping the people has nothing to do with Maid Marian.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that being separate, I don't love, and again, it's a product of its time. I don't love that Maid Marian is so like helpless and like, oh, I can't do anything without.
Help and
Yeah.
help.
But aside from like that, she's an incredible character. She's so kind and so
Yes.
gentle
Yes.
and just so lovely. And I think that maybe makes up for it a little. I'm not sure. But it just like the moment she brings him up and she's like, oh, he's probably forgotten about me. And then the next scene is him like singing and thinking about her. I just think it's so cute. And like,
Yeah.
I think there are times when love as a quote unquote plot point can work. And I think that this helped the movie along rather than made me feel icky about it.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that.
No.
And I can see that for you. So makes sense. Yeah,
I
I
yeah,
made a
I
note
loved
too
them
that like
together.
when she's playing with the children, it's such an accurate representation of what it's like to play make believe with children. Like it's just like they captured that so well. I mean, aside from like kissing a random kid that you just met, but
Yeah.
on the cheek,
There are
I will
so
add.
many weird like kiss moments with her too. I was like, oh, the
I
award is a kiss from
like
Maid
she's just
Marian.
dishing out kisses to anyone and everyone who wants one, I guess. But yeah,
She's
no,
a
she
whore.
is. No, she's great and lovely.
No, I'm kidding. I was kidding.
I know, you're just kidding. But anyway, those are all my questions. I guess I don't know. I feel like we didn't talk about Prince John too much in this, but yeah,
We
he's just kind of
did.
like a mid. He's like a mid villain as far as ranking goes. I think he's lower than King Magnifico on my list anyway.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I'd have to agree. I
Mm.
almost would put him in the like we can use him as like one of the weakest of the villains when we refer to weak villains now.
Mm, mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm.
in our ranking system, we have like Frollo being one end and Prince John can be the other.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Yeah, that's all I have.
That's all, folks. Well, thanks for tuning in. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can always email us at mhm.thepodcast.com or follow us on Instagram and let us know what you thought about what your thoughts are, what you thought about this episode, the movie, the villains, and if you have anything more to add.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mental Health Multiverse. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at mhm.thepodcast.
And join our Patreon for as little as $3 for bonus and additional content.
You can follow both of us on Instagram and TikTok, HB at Heather Bodie.
And me, Marissa/LB at littleben_notbroken. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend.
Screenshot it and tag us on Instagram or leave us a rating or review.
Thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon.